All right, let's get right into it. First of all, before we get into the 5 powerful prospecting tips, I have a question for you that would need to be asked before we could even give you those tips. Are you prospecting? Are you prospecting? If you want to improve a system, you must first have a system on which you can improve, okay? I could give you a great tip of what type of email to send out to what type of prospect, but if you're not collecting emails, then that tip wouldn't do you any good. I could give you great topics of conversation when you meet a new merchant, but if you don't have time in your schedule to go meet a new merchant, then that tip is not going to do you any good. So let's go through a few questions and tips here. First of all, just to make sure that you have some type of prospecting system in place. First of all, how many hours per day and week do you spend prospecting? You should know the answer to that question immediately. You should not even have to hesitate there. If the answer to that question did not pop into your mind immediately, or if the answer to that question popped into your mind and it was, 0 or very little time, then definitely this would be the first place you need to start. Because if you want to succeed in this business, you have to be prospecting. Prospecting is the engine to grow your business. So if you're not out there every day meeting new prospects, talking to new business owners, you will not succeed in this business. Your business will die off, and I can just guarantee you that. It's simple math. Okay, you are going to lose some clients every year, so if you're not adding new clients, your business will decrease and it will eventually die. So we have to be out there prospecting. So the first question would be, how many hours are you prospecting? What is your opening pitch? Okay, if I ask you that question right now, what is your opening pitch? What would your answer be? I mentioned this on the training we did last week on Monday and Tuesday, but I'm always so surprised when, I guess not surprised isn't the right word, but discouraged, I guess, when sales agents will call me and say, James, I cannot get a good response from business owners when I walk into the business. And I always say the same thing. I've had the same conversation probably 100 times. They say, I don't get a good response when I walk in. I say, okay, what's your opening pitch? And I get one of 2 responses. They either will hem and haw around and they don't know what their opening is, and they'll say, well, I basically say, I tell them who I am, and then, and I say, no. Act like I'm the merchant and give me your opening pitch. And sometimes they can't even do that. Other times they'll say, I use the same pitch that you use. And I say, okay, go ahead and give it to me. And if they don't have it right in front of them, then usually they say some terrible opening. And I say, that is not my opening, and I've never done an opening anything like that, okay? So what's your opening pitch? We'll talk about some tips for that in a minute, but you need to have an opening pitch that you use. Because again, if you're going to improve your opening pitch and take some tips from me, you need to have something to start with. So if I say, what's your opening pitch? Could you give me that opening pitch right now? If I unmuted your line, could you give me that opening pitch exactly as it's supposed to be given? What information do you gather, and what do you do with that information? Okay, do you get the email address? And if so, what are you doing with that email address? Do you get their street address? A lot of people I know will go out prospecting and they don't even get a mailing address, a street address for the business. Some people don't even write down the name of the owner. Those are important pieces of information, and you need to not only gather the information, but have a plan of what you're going to do. Maybe your plan is you're going to gather 100 email addresses and then you're going to decide what to do with them. That's fine. That's a good plan. Have a plan though. What information are you going to gather? What are you going to do with that information? How do you track good prospects for follow-up? And what is your current follow-up offer? So 2 questions here. First of all, what is your system for tracking follow-up visits, whether it be the next day, the next week, the next month, or the next year? What is your system for tracking follow-ups? And what is your current follow-up offer? Okay, every month when I go to do follow-ups, I have a different follow-up offer that I use, and I rotate them about every 3 or 4 months. 1 month I will come in and I'll bring a free terminal with me, and I'll show them and say, hey, I just wanted to come back. I know I talked to you a couple months ago, and we have a special offer this month. We're doing free terminals, and I show them the free terminal. The next month I might come back and say, we have a special offer this month. You don't have to sign up for a long-term agreement. We have a month-to-month agreement. Or I might come back another month and say we have a special blended rate, and give them a blended rate. So I switch different offers, do different offers. Sometimes I'll go in and say, I can get you, if you currently have internet service, then I will for free, I'll run a Ethernet cable from your router over to your terminal, get that all set up so you can process over the internet, which processes a lot faster, and the transaction fee is a lot cheaper. So just different things like that. And so those are all ideas that you can use, but you need to have something in place. What is your current procedure for follow-ups, and what's your offer when you go back in to follow up? So, do you have a system, and do you follow your own system? You must have a system, and you must follow your system if you're going to improve it. If you don't have the discipline to follow your own system, then you're never going to have the discipline to implement a tip that I would give you to improve that system. Guys, keep in mind that any system you come up with will be better than no system at all, okay? If you don't have a system for prospecting right now, and you're a little busy today, then just get off the webinar right now, make your system, and that will be a huge benefit, even if you don't finish the rest of the webinar today. Because any system that you come up with, if you think it through, just having procedures in place and then following that system, that's always going to be better than not having any system at all. Okay, so let's talk about 5 powerful prospecting tips. So you have a prospecting system in place, or maybe you've decided now you're going to work on one. So let's talk about some powerful prospecting tips. Number 5, choose a target market. A target market will answer the question, who are you not trying to sell? Now I'm going to tell you a little story about that. When I first got into this industry, the credit card processing company that I worked for, their compensation was terrible, but they did offer some telemarketed leads. And one of the big problems was they told me that they would stay within about 15 miles of my house, and their telemarketers were not very good, so they ran out of numbers pretty quickly. I'm in a rural area, so there's not very many businesses within 15 miles as far as telemarketing goes. And next thing I know, about 2 months into it, I am getting leads down in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour from me. And I thought about, oh man, I probably shouldn't even run these leads. I should call them and say, don't give me these. But then I thought, well, it's a lead. Maybe I can go make a sale. Drove down to Johnstown. I worked for that processor for another 4 weeks. I made 6 sales in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And I have since probably spent, maybe $1,000 in gas money driving back and forth to Johnstown to service those 6 clients. And that was a huge waste of time, a huge waste of money, and I never should have done that, but I hadn't defined my target market. So let me encourage you to define your target market in 3 different areas. Number 1, your geographical target. Where will you not sell? Okay? Decide how far out from your home you're willing to go to get a sale. And if you say, well, I'm willing to go as far as it takes, okay, that's not very smart. Unless it's a big deal or a multi-location client, you want to stay very tight around your house. If you're doing in-field prospecting like I did, and with the very first company I used, I did in-field prospecting. And if you're going to do that, then my recommendation would be to stay within 5 miles of your home. Okay, stay within 5 miles of your home to do in-field prospecting starting out, and agree to take any referrals that are within 10 miles. So keep a really tight target market at the beginning. Now this obviously would be different if you are doing telemarketing. You have to open that geographical target up a little bit. But if you're going to open up your geographical target, what I would do is recommend that you are a little tighter on these next 2. What business types? Okay, as a general rule, you want to start out with retail and restaurant locations. Stay away from doctor's offices, lawyers, corporate clients, things like that. You want to stick with individually owned small businesses that are either retail or restaurant. If you're going to be out in the field or setting up appointments for yourself, those 2 business types are the best. Some agents have had a lot of success with targeting even a more specific business type. Maybe you go after just the pizza places in your market and try to get those first. So you look up on Google Maps, find all the pizza places within 10 miles of your location, go to all of those, and work that very targeted market. So it really helps when you target your market with the business type and then business size. Now again, when you start out, you want to stay away from your real big chains, larger businesses. So think about the business size that you're going to target. Now later on, you might have 2 totally separate selling strategies. You have one target market that's larger businesses, one target market that's smaller businesses, but you have to treat each of those separately. And you have to have that market segmented, so you have 2 target markets. So the number 5 most powerful prospecting tip I could give you is choose a target market and answer the question, who are you not going to try and sell? Number 4, Use LinkedIn to gain connections, referrals, and references. Guys, I believe wholeheartedly that the most powerful technology tool for the sales agent today is the website LinkedIn. Okay? If you had to tell me I had to choose between giving up my iPad or giving up my LinkedIn profile, I would give up my iPad in a heartbeat. If you told me that I had to go back to using a regular cell phone that did not have all the bells and whistles on it, or I could give up LinkedIn, I would give up my smartphone. LinkedIn is more powerful for sales agents than any other technology tool that you could use in the field. Okay? Other than the bare basics that you just have to have for your business, LinkedIn is the most powerful technology today. Now, I have an entire blog article about it, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but go to ccsalespro.com. You can either write down the link that's there, or if you go to ccsalespro.com and click on the blog, then you can search the blog over in the upper right-hand corner for LinkedIn, or you can search for Generate Leads using LinkedIn, and you'll find that blog article there, okay? And if you don't find it and you would like to read it, then send me an email and I'll get back to you. But guys, basically, you know, the most important thing I can tell you from that is when you use LinkedIn, you want LinkedIn to mirror your real-life network. All right. When I had to really, I have a book recommendation on there using LinkedIn, but I had to really change my profile after I read some books about it, because I had about I think 700 connections, and right now I have 140. And I went from 700 to 140. Now, why in the world would I do that? Well, I did that because now those 140, those are actual real life connections that I have that I can call, that I can utilize, okay? So you really want to try to work on your LinkedIn profile. And what I mean by that is when you go out in the field and get a sale or a prospect, ask them if they're on LinkedIn. And say, hey, I have a great group that I have for local business owners. I send information out on my LinkedIn profile. Are you on LinkedIn? If they say yes, get their email address and you can send them a LinkedIn invite. And now all of a sudden you have a real life connection. That connection can see your connections, vice versa. Very, very powerful technology tool. Learn how to use LinkedIn. That's my number 4 most powerful prospecting tip. Number 3, we touched on this earlier, but you need to memorize, rehearse, and track results from your opening pitch and first 2 responses. The very first, minute or so of your conversation with a merchant should all be memorized. Now, you might have several different pitches that you memorize, but it should all be committed to memory. If you want to get more information about this, go to CC Sales Pro on YouTube. Go on YouTube and search for CC Sales Pro Learning Your Lines. And you'll find my video on there, Learning Your Lines, and it's going to explain to you the exact pitch that I use as well as my 2 responses that I use. But again, we touched on that earlier. It's very important. The most powerful, the number 3 most powerful tip I could give you for prospecting is you've got to memorize and rehearse and track results from your opening pitch. Now, some of you have memorized and rehearsed it, but you're not tracking your results. You want to look at your opening pitch like a system. You have a system in place that you constantly use, and then you track results from that. If you're losing people at a certain part of the pitch, you can change that and then track your results. Are you getting a better response? Are you gaining more processing statements by using this adjusted pitch? So if you need a system to start with here, go to my, the CC Sales Pro Learning Your Lines and copy my pitch. Use it exactly word for word. Then once you have that in place, then you might branch out and say, okay, now I'm going to start to make adjustments and I'm going to start to track my results from my market and see if maybe I can make this pitch a little bit more enticing. All right, here's our next 2. I got these 2 together. We're going to go through these. Number 2 most powerful prospecting tip, learn the skill of active listening. Now, you guys are probably getting sick of hearing me say this, but I want to give you a couple things about this, and then here's what I want to do. Let me see how many people we have on here right now. Yeah, we got quite a few on here. Let me ask you to do something for me. If you guys would do me a favor and go into the question bar, and everybody that's out actively selling in the field, go into the question bar while I'm giving you these things and type out a common objection that you hear in the field. It could be right after your opening, It could be towards the end when you're closing, whatever it might be. Type out an objection or a concern or an issue, something, and type it out just the way a customer would say it to you, okay? Just type it out real quick, just the way the customer would say it to you. Go over to the question box and just type that out, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you how to do this active listening using the objections that you guys give me. So everybody that's out in the field selling, if you could do me a favor, again, if you can't think of one, that's fine. There's plenty of people on the call. We'll have tons of them, but go in there if you can and just please type out in the question bar real quick, type out an objection or an issue or a concern that you would hear from a customer, and I'm going to cover those in just a second. So let me read through these first few and then we'll do the role play. First of all, read the 7 habits of highly effective people. That is where I got most of the ideas for active listening. Since then, I've done quite a bit of research on it, but that's where I got the general ideas for the 7 habits of highly effective people, is where I learned about active listening. Learn to listen to what the prospect says. That is how you begin active listening, is you actually have to listen to the prospect, okay? Once you have listened to the prospect, you then repeat back to them what they said in a way of so you feel or so you felt. In other words, you repeat back to them how you think they felt or how you think they feel about what they're talking about. And then you go back and forth with that until you fully understand what they're saying. And again, I'll show you that in a minute. Once you understand them, then you can seek to be understood, and then you'll come back with something that you would like them to understand. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Let me go through the questions first. I see some people have their hand raised, so that's fine. I'll get you in a second. I'm going to start out with the questions that we have actually typed out. So the first one comes from Curtis. He says, I'm happy with who we are using. I'm happy with who we're using, okay? So we listen to what they say. They say that they're happy with who they are using. So now what we're going to do is we're going to repeat that back to them in a way of how we think that means they feel. Now, usually what that would mean to me is that they feel like they're getting a great service, okay? And a great price. So it works better for me if it's the price, so that's where I'm going to start. So if the customer said, I'm happy with who we're using, I'd say, so you feel like the company you're with now is giving you the best rate? See how I repeat that to them. Now, they might say, well, no, I don't know if they're giving me the best rate. I just like whatever. They say, I like the service. Well, then I'm going to say, oh, okay, so not necessarily the rate, but you feel like the service they're providing is unparalleled, that no one else could match that service. And then they say, yes, that's what it is. Now I can move on to my rebuttal. Okay, but I start by actively listening to them. Okay, and let's do another one. Next one. Brian, someone says, I'm with my bank. And I would say something, normally when they say they're with their bank, they feel like it's all put together as one deal. So I'm going to say, they say, well, I'm with my bank. And I say, so you feel like the fact that you're with your bank helps you because you have all your banking and credit card processing with one vendor. Is that right? Okay. And usually they're going to say yes to that. When they say yes to that, I'm going to reply with, well, you know what you might not realize is that your bank doesn't actually do the credit card processing in-house. They really just take your information and either sell that or provide it to another credit card processing company like mine. And then what they do is that company takes the information and tries to sell you on their credit card processing services. So that's how I'm going to explain that to them, and then I'm going to move on to my pitch. But again, I'm seeking to understand them before I'm seeking to be understood. Donnie, someone says, I'm not interested in changing credit card processors. You're going to get that one a lot. Somebody says, I'm not interested with changing credit card processing companies. Now, then I would repeat back to them how I think that they're feeling. And I say, you feel like in order to switch credit card processing, it would really be a pain. That's what I'm guessing that they're feeling like. Or they might say, well, no, I've just been burned in the past and I don't trust, new people or whatever it might be. And I'm going to keep saying to them, if they said that, I'd say, so you feel like me being somebody that you've never met before, I can certainly understand if you feel like you can't trust me at this point. Is that basically what we're dealing with? So I'm going to keep saying that over and over again, how they feel until they say, yes, that's how I feel. Okay? Then once, you would be shocked how easy it is to sell somebody once they actually think that you understand what they're saying. Now, at that point, that's pretty simple. Okay, if I know what the concern is, I know that it's that they don't trust me yet, then I say, I totally understand that, Tom. Let me do this for you. I have a lot of clients here in the local area that trust me, people that I have worked with in the past. What I'd like to do is this. I'd like to come back next week on Thursday, bring some free information for you, including a free cost analysis, and I'm also going to have several letters of recommendation from other local business owners that you can contact to confirm that I am honest and that I do good work. Would that help to alleviate the concern that you're having, Tom? So you get the idea there. But again, I would never know what line to say if I didn't first actively listen and understand their concern. Next, Jeff. Someone says, I just signed a new contract. Oh, I get that one a lot. Okay. Oh, I just signed a new contract. I'd say, so you feel like because you signed that contract, you wouldn't be able to get out of that to switch over to my service? They're going to say what? Yes, that's exactly the problem, okay? I'm going to reply and say, boy, you know what? I actually have great news for you, Jeff. We actually have a program that allows us to pay the early termination fee for your processing, for the current processor that you're with. And even better news than that, you'll never have to sign a contract again, Jeff, because with me, the companies I support, we only do month-to-month agreements because we feel like our pricing and our service is what should keep our clients, not a contract. Does that make more sense to you? So that's how I would handle that. But again, I start out by making sure I understand because you never know. I might say, so you feel like because you're in that contract that, you just wouldn't be able to get out of that to switch to me. They might say, no, it's not that at all. It's that I just signed up with this guy and he's local and I feel like I'm supporting him and I don't want to, mess up that relationship. Okay. Or they might say, I just signed with my bank when I got a loan and I'm worried that they're going to have a problem with that. So you never know what they're going to say. So you got to make sure that you are repeating back to them and saying how they feel and make sure you're actively listening. Tony, same one. He says, thanks. I just switched to a new company. We got that one. Eric says, I have so many of you guys walking through my door. I'm tired of this. Oh boy, I love that one. But I get that sale almost every time. But anyway, I do love that one. So actively listening, we're going to respond back to that one and say you feel like all of us are the same. Basically, we're all just coming in here offering you the same thing day after day, huh? And he's going to say, yes, of course, okay? Now, after he says yes to that, then basically I'm going to reply with the statement that I always use there is I always say the same thing. I say, boy, I really apologize for that. Tom, it's so frustrating to me. Sometimes I feel like I'm a used car salesman, and usually they'll laugh when you say that. Sometimes I feel like I'm a used car salesman. I have a bad reputation because there's so many guys that come into this industry, they get started, and then they work a little bit part-time, sell a few people, and then they move on to something else. Tom, I want you to understand, I am actually a business owner. I'm not an employee of a company. I'm a local business owner just like you. I make my money from the income I get monthly as I keep my customers satisfied. So I'm not here trying to rip you off so I can make a quick buck and move on to the next business. I actually want to build a long-term relationship with you. Now, with that in mind, Tom, would you at least be willing to take some free information if I swung by later on next week to show you some letters of reference and some things that will validate so you can see that I'm really a local small business owner just like you are? And usually they'll say yes to that. Donnie says, I've been with my bank for a long time now. And again, I'm going to go back with that one and say, so you basically feel like your loyalty to the bank is the most important thing and you wouldn't want to jeopardize your relationship with them. And they'll say, yes, that's right. I don't want to jeopardize my relationship with the bank. Say, well, I have good news for you in that. I happen to know that, well, first I'm going to find out which bank they're with, by the way, but I'd say I happen to know that XYZ bank that you work with, they actually don't do credit card processing. You're not actually doing credit card processing with the bank. What they do is they have a vendor relationship, a processing company like mine, and what they do is they do get a small percentage of the profit on the deals that they refer to that company, but it's not like they have this list where they're constantly saying who's canceling, who's staying. They've just given your information as a lead to a different company just like mine. So, if I'm able to save you money and, get you away from the bank, but in order to save you money, I would have to do that. Would you at least be willing to take a look at a free proposal to see what those numbers would look like? That's how I handle that. Mark says, you are the third guy this week to stop by, and I've told them I'm not interested. Again, I'd handle that one the same as the one I just did a second ago. Let's see here. So let's go down to the next one. Savings. Okay, customer says, everybody says the same thing and they tell you one thing and give you another. Eventually, I'm paying the same amount. Oh, I love that one. I used to hate that one, but I love that one now that we have month-to-month contracts and free equipment. So here's how I handle that. So let me read it back to you and then I'll do it like I'm the customer here. Everybody says the same thing. They tell you one thing and give you another. Eventually, I'm paying the same amount. Well, John, I certainly hope I understand what you're saying. I mean, basically what you're telling me is that you've had a situation where a sales agent has come in, told you they're going to save you money, but then eventually they keep taking your price up until you're right back to where you're at. Is that basically what you're telling me? And they'll say yes. I say, okay, well, I'm glad I understand that because that's one of the reasons that we work the way that we do. And let me explain this to you real quick. We have a month-to-month agreement. Now, the current company you're with, if I understand correctly, probably you're in a 3-year agreement and you can't get out of that agreement. Am I right? And they're going to say yes and say, okay, well, here's the problem with that. There's nothing to keep them from raising your price because they can raise your price all they want during those 3 years and you're stuck with that agreement unless you're going to pay a hefty cancellation fee to get out of it. That's basically the problem, isn't it? And they're going to say yes. I say, okay, well, with our service, we have a month-to-month agreement. We have no cancellation fee whatsoever, and we provide you with free equipment. So what I tell most of my clients to do is this. Try me out. Sign up with it. I'll bring you a free terminal. You can set it right next to the terminal that you have in your shop. It's a month-to-month agreement. Once you get your first statement or two, if I did give you the savings I promised, then you can stay with me. Or if you say, hey, this guy didn't do what he promised, there's no way I have to hold on to your business, so you could just cancel my service and go right back to the other company and just, I'll come get my terminal and you can keep using the one you have now. Now, if I would be willing to do a month-to-month agreement, free equipment, basically no obligation on your end, would you at least be willing to try me out and see if I am telling the truth? And usually you'll get a yes to that. John has another one of why change? Why change? Again, there I'm going to repeat back to them how I think they're feeling. I say, they'd say, well, why should I change? I'd say, so you feel like there's really no good reason to change processing companies? And they say, and that you'd be surprised. A lot of times people will talk themselves in. So a question like that, this is a perfect example of where active listening comes in handy. Somebody says, well, why should I change? Now, I could answer that question with, well, because of savings or because of this or because of that. But if I am actively listening, then I'm going to repeat back to them and say, so you feel like there's no reason to ever switch from one vendor to another? And they'll say, oh, well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, a lower price is a good reason. Okay, now what a good position we're in, right? They just said that if we can save them money, that's a good reason to switch. So obviously now we go for the statement, okay? So active listening. Mark says, I get my money the next day. People that have next day funding. Now, first of all, on that's a kind of a special case. Realize that next day funding doesn't really work. In most cases, the business owner thinks they're getting next day funding, but they're usually getting second day funding, something like that. But anyway, let's say somebody was getting next day funding, then I would say this. I'd say, now, Mark, that's a great point. And if I understand correctly, next day funding is important to you, right? And they're going to say, yeah, it's very important for my cash flow. I'd say, okay. Now, let me ask you a question. Now, we don't have next day funding. We do have next day funding available, but I don't really recommend it. It's something I'll say sometimes. But this is what I tell the client. I say, I understand that's important to you, but let me ask you a question. If your current processor called you up and said, in order to continue getting next day funding, we're going to charge you a fee of $50 a month extra, or you can get your funds 2 to 3 business days instead of 1 business day later, would you still want next day funding even if it was costing you an extra $50 a month? Usually they'll say no. Sometimes they'll say yes, and then I say, okay, what about if it was $100? And then if they say yes, I say, what about $150? Where is that price point? Because I guarantee you somewhere in here, there's a price point where if you could save a certain amount of money to not have next day funding, you would probably switch to not have the next day funding. Once I get to that number, then I say, okay, well, to be honest with you, I think it's realistic. I might be able to save you that amount of money. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to come back next week, give you some free information about our service, including a cost analysis to show you how much I can save you. And really, it sounds like if I can save you $75, $80, it would be worth it to you to save that money every month, even though we would have your money to you 2 or 3 business days later instead of 1 business day later. Is that right? So there you go. That's how I handle that. What if you don't have any clients in the area? Mark says. Well, you just have to be creative there. I still use the, you can still use a letter of reference. You probably know somebody in the area that likes you and trusts you. So you can still use a letter of reference. I try to find a business owner. Most people know a business owner. Could even be a relative, something like that. But you just want something. Something is better than nothing there. But the other thing that I'll say a lot of times is, I'll say, when I'm prospecting, I'll say, well, I'm actually going to meet Bob over at XYZ company. Well, I might be going to meet Bob just to talk to Bob. That's fine. I am going to meet Bob at XYZ company, and I'm going to give him a statement analysis or whatever. So you can be creative with that. I do like to use customer names as often as I can, though. How do I prevent the price shopping, haggling merchant from eroding my sale? How can I stand my ground on pricing? Oh, that's a really good one. So let's convert this into how the customer would say this. I guess the customer, most likely in that situation, they would say, well, here's the price that, here's what I'd like to do with this price or that price. Now, here's what I found is really effective, okay? When I go in to do a presentation, before I get into all the analysis stuff, what I start out with is I say something like, now, Bob, what I did for you, I went through and looked at your business type, your processing volume, and you actually qualify for our minimum pricing requirements. And these are set by the processing company that I work with. And so what I did was I went ahead and put you at the minimum pricing requirements. So I just want to let you know that ahead of time. I'm not one of these guys that's going to waste your time by coming back 10 times in a row. I just give you my minimum pricing requirements if you qualify. And in your case, you do qualify for them. So I went ahead and did that. Start your sales presentation with that when you're doing the cost analysis, and then that will save you all the haggling, because when they ask you a question, you say, well, like I said, Tom, you can see here the overall savings are significant, but like I said, this is the minimum pricing. I went ahead and did that. That way I don't like to, I don't want to waste your time and my time by coming back and forth. I just give you my best price, and I guarantee you nobody is going to beat this price. If you ever find somebody that does beat this price, I will immediately match their price. Okay, that's what I tell people. All right. Let's see here. But that wasn't a good example of active listening. I'm just answering that question because I think that would probably come a little later on in the sales process. Okay, that's all the questions that we had there. Now, let me look real quick and just see who has their... we might have one more here. Once you show the analysis and show a savings, what are the chances their current processor will match it? Can a competitor change their fees? Okay, we got a couple others here. So... if you give them the statement analysis, the chances that their current processor will match it are probably 75%. Okay? So don't let them do that. Here's what I do. Once I get done with the analysis for them, I first of all try to close the deal right then. If I cannot close the deal right then and they want some time to think about it, I say, Tom, that's great. I have no problem. You can take as much time as you need to think about this. Could I ask one favor, though, just as a matter of honesty between business owners? One thing that some of my clients have done in the past is that, they've taken a processing analysis that I've given them, and then they take that back to their current processor and get them to match the price. Now, if we look at this objectively, Donnie, what we're going to see here is that your current processor over the last, how long have you been with them? You said 2 years, and they'll say yes. Okay, so let's say you've been with them, let's say they've been with them for, 36 months, let's say. So you've been with them for 36 months, and I see here that they were charging you an extra $100 a month more than what they needed to charge you over that 36 months. So over the last 36 months, if you had been with me, you would have saved $3,600. Is that right, Donnie? And they're going to say, yeah, that's right. I say, okay. Well, let me just make sure we're on the same page with something, because I don't like to do price haggling and everything like that. If you contact your current processor and you show them my statement, they're probably going to match my price because they would rather match my price and keep your business. But let me ask you a question. Is that really the kind of company that you want to work with? Now, here's what I would like to ask you to do, Donnie. Unless they're willing to refund the money that they've overcharged you, if you call them up and they're like, oh yeah, I'll match that price immediately. Unless they're willing to refund you the money that they've overcharged you over the last 3 years, you're not going to keep staying with them versus coming with me since I'm the one that showed you the savings. You wouldn't do that to me, would you? That's how I present it, okay? Usually the merchant will agree to that. Now, it doesn't always work, but I find it cuts my odds down from 75% to 25%, okay? Because then when they call me and say, yeah, I decided, because you got to understand, if they say they decide to stay with their current processor, that doesn't mean that my sale is dead. Okay, I still get to go back in and make a pitch. It's not like they went with somebody else. They just stayed with who they have. My sales process isn't any more complex. So now I can go back in and say, well, now, Tom, we agreed the other day that, that if they just matched the price that I gave, that you would still give me a shot. Now, you're still going to give me a shot, aren't you? So you can go back in and do your pitch. Mark. Okay, next. So we have all of those. Let me see if there's somebody else. I think somebody had their hand up. Brian has his hand up here. Brian, I got your line unmuted. Can you? Did you still need to ask me a question? Or did you have an objection for me? Okay, I didn't see one there. All right, here we go. So there we go, guys. That's learning active listening. I hope that was a help. That took a little longer than I had planned, but I hope that was useful to you guys. And this is all being recorded, by the way. So if you want to listen to some of that again, I'll have it on my YouTube channel later today. Number one, the number one most powerful prospecting tip I can give you is to learn the art of the block schedule. Now, I'm going to give you these three things, and then I'm actually going to show you my schedule from last week because I think it'd be easier for you to see what this looks like. Start off by scheduling start off by scheduling what must be scheduled. That's tip number one. And again, I'm going to show you this in a minute. Number two, schedule important projects like prospecting. Okay, blocking out time for that. Number three, leave plenty of open time, not free time, to work your inbox. There's a difference between open time and free time, and I'm going to explain that to you right now. This is my schedule from last week, okay? This is my projected schedule. In other words, this is the schedule I put together at the beginning of the week. Now, notice a couple things here. Now, first of all, I'm sorry it's so dimly lit. That's because it's from last week, so it always fades it out. But these are blocks that I have in here, and I started out with things I had to schedule. For instance, sleep, okay? I had sleep scheduled. I sleep 8 hours a night, and I have that scheduled in. I don't always get to bed at 11. I don't always wake up at 7, but I have sleep in my schedule, all right? That's a sleep schedule I found that works pretty well for me. I also have home. Now, home is basically my code for personal time. As you can see, I normally take Wednesdays off, so I have a big block in here for home on Wednesday. I had several evenings where I had time I was going to be at home. I have other things that have to be scheduled. For instance, I have church services where I'm a youth pastor. I visit teens on Saturday. We had teen activity here on Thursday afternoon. Different things that must be scheduled. So I put all those in first. I start out with the things that I have to do. I have no, alternative. These are things I've already decided to do. They're, recurring tasks, and I make these recurring in my schedule, so I don't have to schedule these every week. When I start my schedule each week, I already have sleep and home and, pre-scheduled things that are already in there that are repeating every week. Next, I schedule important projects. Here from 2 to 3 on Monday, I had time scheduled to write a new blog post and to do some social media stuff. I have all kinds of different projects in here. Here I'm preparing for a teen activity. Here I'm preparing for a public webinar. Here's the public webinar from last week. Projects that I'm working on, I schedule my time for projects. For you guys, you would have a lot of time in here for prospecting. You'd probably have 3 or 4 hours a day, maybe have it split into 2 different time blocks for your block schedule. So the next thing that you do is you schedule important projects. Then you want to leave open time. Like for instance, right here is an open time in my schedule. I have 45 minutes there that's not scheduled. I have time here that's not scheduled. I have time here that's not scheduled. Here that's not scheduled. So I have all these different times that are not scheduled. Those are times when I can go through my email inbox, or I can schedule things in throughout my week. So if a customer called me, then they would say I had a customer call me on Wednesday and say, hey, I've got a problem with my terminal. I would say, hey, can I come out there tomorrow morning and meet you at 8 o'clock? Because I have open time there, so I can schedule other things in. I leave myself some margin of time to schedule things in. Now, let me show you something else. Once you have that done, if you really want to be organized, I talk a lot about, this always living as one of my core values, always living, always leveraging. Well, what does that really look like? This is what that looks like, just like that. This is a separate schedule that I keep where I literally track every minute of my day down to about 5 minutes, and I put in every single thing that I do. Okay? So here is everything that I did last week. every single thing. Now, if you look at it compared to my actual calendar, there's some things that are the same, some things are very different, some things I had to change throughout the week. But as a general rule, I try to make sure that I follow my schedule as closely as I can, but then I put in even my open time, I fill everything in as I'm going throughout my day, almost like a journal. It takes a little bit of extra time, but not much. So now at the end of each week, I look back, I print out my projected schedule, and then I print out my actual schedule. And I look at those two, and then I sit down with my wife and we'll talk about it and say, okay, here's some things we should change. Here's some things going on next week. Here's where I need to put more time into this or more time into that. And that is what I mean when I say always living. I mean always having something, in place so that, you can see what your schedule's like. And that is learning the art of the block schedule. So again, you start off by scheduling what must be scheduled. You then schedule important projects. I have a project list, a project planner of like projects I'm working on, and I'll put those times in. Again, prospecting would be a project. So it's very important that you have block scheduled time in there for a project. And then you want to leave plenty of open time, not free time, to work your inbox. All right, today.